I want to welcome everyone who's here tonight, both in person and attending via the webinar. Appreciate you being here, taking your Thursday night to, in an entirely voluntary way, be here. There are a couple of thank yous I want to do really quickly because I'm notorious for long thank yous, so these are going to be very, very quick. I do want to recognize and thank the Dean of the School of Business Administration, Dr. Ken Anderson, for all the support he has given over the years for the Aram Lecture and all the support and vision and vitality he has brought to the School of Business as we develop ourselves into an exemplar of Jesuit business education. This event tonight fits into that very intimately. So thank you, Dean Anderson. So I want to tell you a little bit real quickly about why this is the Aram Lecture, where that name comes from. This lecture series is named in honor of Mr. John L. Aram, who was a longtime benefactor and trustee of Gonzaga University. And upon his retirement in 1988, I believe it was, a group of timber companies, Weyerhaeuser, Potlatch, and others, and some family friends put together an endowment to create this chair, the Aram Chair in Business Ethics, which I am very, very honored to currently hold. Mr. Aram was known for his emphasis and on ethical behavior, both in the organizations that he led in the timber industry and with those other entities with whom he did business. So I'm very honored that we have the Aram Chair in Business Ethics and that I get to be a part of furthering, hopefully through this lecture and other things that we do, the message that Mr. Aram brought to everything that he did in business, okay? Now, and I'll try to shorten the, it won't be quite as short as from Ferguson, but anyways, our 2022 and our 14th Aram Lecture in Business Ethics is Mr. Bob Chapman. Mr. Chapman is the chairman and CEO of Barry-Wehmiller, St. Louis-based, and if I get the numbers wrong, correct me, $3 billion global capital and equipment business with more than 12,000 team members, not employees, 12,000 team members. He became the senior executive of Barry-Wehmiller, I'm just going to say BW from here on out, at the time an 80-year-old business in 1975, correct? Over the next 40 plus years, he has led BW through more than 115 successful acquisitions, which transformed the company into a global leader. And as if that wasn't enough in terms of success, spurred by several realizations, or maybe we say epiphanies, that he encountered several decades ago, Mr. Chapman has emerged as one of the global leaders for reforming traditional management practices and techniques, moving away from a kind of bottom line centric approach to a people centric approach. Truly human leadership, which is the management approach that Mr. Chapman and other team members at BW have developed over the past decade, is grounded in a non-negotiable commitment to creating workspaces and cultures where team members feel valued, cared for, and an integral part of their company's purpose. Mr. Chapman has developed a number of initiatives over the years. Well, I will let him describe to you if he desires to do so, but I will tell you that that includes a university and a leadership academy. So markers of success. His book in co-authorship with Raj Sisodia, who's a founder of the Conscious Capitalism movement, entitled Everybody Matters, The Extraordinary Power of Caring for People Like Family, transformed the landscape of management theory and practice and continues to influence the work of CEOs and other business leaders seeking to build organizations that serve the individual and collective good of their members. The importance of Mr. Chapman's work is borne out by the fact, and I'm just going to cite a few here, that he has recently been named the #3 CEO in the world by Inc. magazine, a top 10 social capital CEO by International Business Magazine, was awarded the Society for Human Resource Management CEO of the Year, and was invited, I think it was in September, to talk to the UN about transforming business education. And again, that's just a few. Please join me, and this is a great honor, in welcoming the 2022 Aram Lecture in Business Ethics, Mr. Bob Chapman.
We had a great rector of our church who one time said, tell people what you're going to tell them, and then tell them, and then remind them of what you told them. Okay? So the message that I hope that you walk away with is that we have a desperate need in our country to heal the brokenness we're all feeling by creating leaders who have the skills and courage to care for the people they have the privilege of leading. And so I'm going to walk you through my journey of what I used to call it people-centric leadership, leadership focused on the people we had the privilege of leading. Simon Sinek, who wrote the book Finding Your Why, who's become our kind of biggest advocate, he said, no, Bob, this is truly human leadership. And I would say to you that there is absolutely no question. I've been on this transformational journey for about 20 years. There's not an ounce of doubt in my mind, this is a Jesuit university, that God has blessed us with this message. There's no way this accountant from Ferguson, Missouri, with an average intelligence could possibly have developed this message. I didn't have a mentor. It wasn't a book I read. It wasn't a consultant. It was a series of revelations that completely changed the way I saw the opportunity to lead. And I'm going to mention something to you that I wish somebody had told me when I was at your stage in life. Never occurred to me, it was never told, never heard, never read, that the way I would run our company would affect people's health and the way they'd go home and treat their spouse and their kids. I thought business was business and your personal life was your personal life. But in my 20-year journey now, 95% of the feedback we get from our team members is how our leadership affects their marriage and their relationship with their kids. And so when you look at the issues we face in our society today with anxiety and depression, suicide rate, you say, what's wrong with kids today? Guess where they came from? They came from our families, okay? And the anxiety and depression, and their parents probably worked for a company that didn't care about them, and they came home pretty frustrated, and it impacted the marriage. And looked at the kids see their parents, having a drink when they get home to kind of kill the pain of work. So I honestly believe that all of you could be the vaccine that could go out into this world and heal the brokenness we're all feeling. Okay, you're young. Your minds have not been completely formed in terms of what you want to do with your life. And my hope is tonight to open your mind and your heart to being vaccines and leaving this institution with the skills and courage to care. So that's the theme. That's what I want you to walk with. So I'm going to walk you through this journey. So let me tell you something. I don't envy any of you. I don't wish I could be like you. Because why? Because let me tell you the world you're about to enter. When my granddaughter graduated from Aspen High School 5 years ago, and everybody was cheering as these 150 students walked up to get their diploma, I had tears in my eyes because I knew the world we were sending you all into. And here's the world that you all face. Nobody debates what I'm going to tell you right now. 88% of all people in this country feel they work for an organization that does not care about them. 88%. 3 out of 4 people in this country are disengaged in what they're doing. When I talk to CEOs and I say, you're all worried about the cost of healthcare, you are the problem. 74% of all illnesses are chronic. The biggest cause of chronic illness is stress, and the biggest cause of stress is work, okay? And we're sending those people home with this stress and anxiety, which leads to all kinds of illnesses. Rai Sisodia, my co-author, said there's a 20% increase in heart attacks on Monday mornings when people have to go back to work. Nobody debates what I'm just telling you. That's the world you're about to enter, that we desperately need you to be the vaccine to heal. Jeffrey Pfeiffer, a legendary professor at Stanford, the MBA program, talks about us in his book. It's called Dying for a Paycheck. And they don't mean anxious to get one. Okay. He estimates we are killing 120,000 people a year from work-related stress. 120,000 people a year dying from the stress of work. So, and again, nobody debates these things. We further learned that the person you report to at work is more important to your health than your family doctor. Are you prepared to leave this institution and be a source of goodness for the people you lead? Do you have the skills and the passion to look at the people you have the privilege of leading and the way in which you can affect their life? I was never told that the way I'd run our company would affect people's health. Okay. 65% of all people today would give up a salary increase if they could fire their boss. 58% of all people today would trust a stranger before they would trust a boss. So when I was asked to speak at Brown University to the university presidents, and I went up to Harvard and I said, what's on the minds of university presidents? Going to talk to him, and he said, it's called an epidemic of anguish. An epidemic of anguish. I said, what does that mean? The level of anxiety and depression of incoming students to American universities is at an epidemic level. And there's committees of professors trying to address how can we be good stewards of these precious young lives that come to us with this anxiety, depression. I spoke at the Joint Base in Charleston about a year ago on Suicide Prevention Day for the United States Air Force. The level of suicides in the Air Force is at epidemic level. I was talking to St. Louis University, a Jesuit university. They're one of the top people in their business school the other day. And I said, kind of at the end of the conversation, how are things at the business school? She says, ooh, we said we are having a record level of suicides among our student body. Why? We have prosperity, we have jobs. There's 2 jobs for every person. People are being paid more money. We have economic prosperity, but we don't have human prosperity, okay? We thought if we paid you well and gave you good benefits, you'd be happy. Whoops. Happiness is not created by money. Happiness is created by feeling valued. So that is the world that you're about to enter. So what our society is suffering from is leadership malpractice. We don't have leaders who know how to care. Tom Friedman wrote an article recently in the New York Times, and he said, we don't have a poverty of money in this country. We have a poverty of dignity. And when people don't feel dignified, you'll see anger and unrest in your cities like you've never seen before. Guess what we have? Look at the news. Is it drugs? Is it social media? Is it your iPhone? No. We don't know how to care for each other. And it's creating anxiety and depression and behavior. And he quotes Nelson Mandela, and he says what we need is deep listening. So I want you to remember that the issue we face in our country is a poverty of dignity. It's not an economic issue. It is a human issue. And I go back when I went up to Harvard and I was going to talk at Brown University, I said, what was the purpose of education? What is the purpose of education? And the people at Harvard said to me, well, our founding fathers felt that we needed an informed citizenry to have a democracy. So you'd have a level of ability to vote and help shape our country. So that was the reason we began public education, to have an informed citizenry, to have a democracy. But unfortunately, the Industrial Revolution came along, and great entrepreneurs like Henry Ford, he said, I need engineers, accountants, marketing people, lawyers. And our universities saw this as a great opportunity for people to have what they wanted, which was money, economic prosperity. So our universities became skills factories. We got the best raw material we could, all of you, into the system. We processed you through the system and we sold you to the market. And if the market bought the product, we must be doing something right. So our universities, and so I gave a talk every year at Washington University called Defining Moments. I look back on my career and kind of share defining moments. And I gave a talk a couple of years ago, and the dean of the business school came up to me after my talk and said, Dean, what is your vision for, in this case, the MBA program, the 2 years you have these young men and women in your care? He said, we don't have a vision, we have beliefs that are on the wall. I said, well, if you don't have a vision, how do you know what to teach? He said, we teach what the market wants. I said, Dean, that's pitiful. You're not teaching what the market needs. You're teaching what the market wants. They want skills to make money. Okay, and we need those skills to fill our factories and our offices. And I said, if you ever ask me to be on this board of your university, which I'm confident you will not after this conversation, I would shut this place down tomorrow until what is our vision for the time we have you in our care? What we desperately need to do in education is to embrace a vision of creating tomorrow's leaders who have the skills and courage to care for the people they'll eventually be leading. So we can start creating tomorrow's leaders and start healing this poverty of dignity caused by using people for organizational success. So again, Tom Friedman really expressed it beautifully. You can see the article, but he came at it. It was astounding to me. He expressed it so beautifully, a poverty of dignity in this world. And what we need is deep listening. Guess what we don't teach in education? Listening. We teach speech and debate, but we don't teach listening. So I look back on my education. I got an undergraduate degree in accounting from Indiana, and I got an MBA from Michigan, and I went to work for Pricewaterhouse. Very traditional business education. I'm not a great scholar, but when I look back on my education, I realized I was taught management classes. I got a degree in management, and I eventually got a job in management. So what did I think I was supposed to do? I was supposed to manage people, right? That's the title. Name anybody in your life you can manage. Name anybody in your life that wants to be managed. The language of business is so broken, it is pitiful. Because language impacts behavior. What we don't need managers, bosses, and supervisors. Those words should be banned from the English language. We need mentors, leaders, and coaches, okay, in business. The word management means, in my opinion, and I hope you never use that word again after this class, the word management means the manipulation of others for your success. Leadership means the stewardship of the lives that you are privileged to lead. Completely different perspective of that sense of responsibility. And nobody ever said this, nobody ever taught me this, but I saw people in our organizations as objects for my success. I needed an engineer, I needed salespeople. I needed them for my success. I was a nice guy, and you know, we had a nice place to work, but very typical. But I didn't, I saw them as objects. I introduced them. This is an engineer, this is a marketing director. And I saw them as functions for my, that's the lens through which I saw them. And in our society, we define success as money, power, and position. And it doesn't matter how you get it as long as it's legal. And I'm going to tell you a story that I think will bring this to bear. A gentleman heard me speak a few years ago, and he flew out to Aspen to have dinner with me. I'd heard he's very successful in traditional terms, gentleman, Catholic, a very fine Midwestern person. I sat down with dinner and I said, what are you really proud of in your life? I didn't know this guy, so I was asking him questions. I said, what are you really proud of in your life? And he said, well, I'm known for my $120 million gift to my alma mater. But what I'm really proud of is my minority student athletic scholarship program. So that's wonderful. How many students do you help each year through that program? He said 5 or 6. I said, that's wonderful. I said, I'm just curious, how many people work for your company in the world? And he said 100,000. And I said, so you're telling me you're really proud of 5 or 6 students you help with the minority student athletic scholarship program, and you don't give a shit about the 100,000 people that walk into your building every day who simply want to know they matter? And I said, the greatest act of charity is not the checks you write. The greatest act of charity is how you treat the people you have the privilege of leading. And he was profoundly touched, but he'd never thought of that. He leaned back in his chair and he said, I never thought of that. We have a society where we celebrate people who write checks, and we don't really ask them how they got their money because we don't really care. And they have to write big checks because they're breaking society. So we need a lot of charities to heal the brokenness we're creating by managers, bosses, and supervisors. So again, how do we define success? I'm sure God does not define success this way: money, power, and position. The greatest act of charity is how you treat the people you have the privilege of leading. And as I reflect, that is a huge factor. I was never taught in my education how to inspire people, and I was never taught how to care for people. I was taught how to use people to achieve organizational goals, usually defined as share value, organic growth, market shares, etc. So when my father died in 75, and he had done a leveraged buyout of this company in the mid 60s for about $30,000. And the company was pretty broken, old technology. And I joined the company, and my title, when he asked, because my dad and I never really got along as father and son, but when I got an accounting degree and he was an accountant, he thought, I actually achieved something in my life. So we actually had a relationship. And eventually he said to me in about February of 69, he said, would you consider coming to work for the company? Because I was working for Pricewaterhouse, and I never thought about it. My mother cried because she knew we didn't get along. And my dad and I worked it out, and my title was somebody he could trust. That was my title. I walked into a company, it was about 18 million in sales, about 80 years old. And my dad and his secretary, the first thing they did every day was open every piece of mail that came into the company to see if somebody was trying to cheat them. So that's where I began. And through a long story, there's a lot of stories about this, Harvard wrote a case study, et cetera. I was able to transform this company with no money into today a $3.5 billion global company with 12,000 people. And I'm very proud of the Walton family, is our largest investor. They've got 12% of our company. And the book written about our culture that I'm sharing with you, apparently a good business book sells 5,000 to 10,000. It sold 80,000 copies in 7,000 language. It was just reproduced for a second edition in China. I just spoke to 600 leaders in China the other day. So what I'm talking to you about has really been validated through our book, through the TED Talk, through the recognition, through the Harvard case study. So nobody at Harvard, nobody at McKinsey debates what I just said to you. They just don't know how to do it, okay? Because we don't teach people to be leaders. We teach people to be managers, bosses, and supervisors, and create share price and economic value, but we forgot the human part. So again, Henry Ford did not say, as we gathered together in the Industrial Revolution, I need leaders. He said, I need skills to fill my offices and factories. And when were unions formed? In that very time, because to protect workers from the greed of bosses. Okay, so we've had this conflict from day one. Henry Ford didn't ask for leaders, he asked for skills. What we desperately needed when we came together is people who could bring people together, allow people to share their gifts and inspire them. So again, I only mention this, so our company's grown about 18% a year compounded since 1987. And our share price has gone up about the same. My dad invested $30,000 in the mid 50s. Company's value today is over $3 billion. And it's privately held, but we do have a share price very much simulates it. So my point to you is, if I stood up to you and said didn't make money last year, but we're trying this year, you would all walk out to another class, okay? Because I'm trying to show you, you can create economic value and human value in harmony. They're not in disharmony. If 3 out of 4 people are disengaged, what if the people that worked in your company were engaged, inspired, and shared their gifts fully. So when our case was first introduced at Harvard about 6 years ago, they invited me up to sit in on a classroom about this size with people from around the world, executives from around the world who studied our company through the Harvard case the night before, came into the class to discuss it. So I sat there in the corner of the auditorium for a good hour while they were studying the case, listening to people debate my life. And it's always interesting. And Jan Rifkin, the professor who wrote the case, who was teaching it, he's chair of the MBA program, he posed a question at the end of the class I'd never thought about. He said, is Barry-Wehmiller successful because of its culture or its strategy? I'd never thought about that question. And they debated it for about 10 minutes and then they voted. 75% of the people said our company was successful because of our caring culture. And Jan looked over at the corner of the room and said, Bob, do you want to comment? Never given it 1 ounce of thought. Stood up among these 160 global executives and I said, I understand why you think our success is driven by our culture, but let me offer you the view. The foundation of our success is our business model. The culture amplifies the business model. So let me give you an analogy. If Ferrari designs the perfect high performance engine, perfect, and you put regular 85 octane fuel in that engine, it'll run, you can drive the car, it'll go fast, but you won't win races. If you put 91 octane premium fuel in that engine, that engine will run to the performance of the engineers and you'll win races. So our business model, which I developed in the 1980s, around some of the mistakes I'd made earlier, that's the engine. Our culture is the fuel. You can't put premium fuel in a Toyota and race a Ferrari. Okay, your culture cannot take your business model beyond its capability. That's why a lot of good people with good cultures fail, because they don't have a business model. So as leaders, your responsibility is not just to create a caring environment. You have got to make sure that you have a business model. So when you invite people into your organization, they feel safe. They can raise a family, they can buy a home, they can bring children to this world because they rely upon you for a sense of safety and security so they can have a personal life. Most people in our country do not live with that safety. Okay, the layoffs, FedEx just announced layoffs. One of our big clients is Intel. Intel just announced they're going to lay off thousands of people. Never occurred to me the collateral damage layoff does, because you may not get laid off, but you say, maybe I'm next. How do you make decisions in life if you wonder whether on Friday somebody's going to bring a box to your desk and ask you to move on? Layoffs are devastating to people emotionally and personally. So our business model is robust. So I studied when I was young, General Electric, Jack Welch, the house that Jack built, legendary, share price increases by quarter. Jack was a tough son of a bitch, but he made his number every quarter and the investors rewarded him accordingly. In 08-09, the worst economic environment I have ever seen in my lifetime, guess what happened to General Electric in 08-09? That business model crashed. General Electric will never be the company it was thought to be because the business model failed. In Barry-Wehmiller, our business model went through, we had let nobody go. Our share price went up 11%, and we got stronger in that crisis environment because we had a business model that was robust and people felt safe. They weren't worried about getting let go, and that was profoundly meaningful to our team members. So I want to remind you, as a leader, and no matter what role you go into, you've got to make sure you have a business model. So when you invite people in that organization, you can give them a grounded sense of hope for the future. That is our primary responsibility. So let me explain to you how I went from what I call management to leadership. It's around 3 fundamental principles: people, purpose, and performance. There was a restaurant in Aspen called Boogie's, and it had a sign when you walked in: quality, price, and service. Pick any two. I think I want all three. Okay, so this is not pick any two. And the first word is people. When our fundamental responsibility is to the people in our organization. Simon Sinek's latest book was called Leaders Eat Last. And his point is, your responsibility as a leader is the same thing in the military. Your primary responsibility is the men and women in your care to make sure that in your care that they have a future, that they can share their gifts and go home feeling valued. So our product is our people. We create machinery, but our product is our people, not the machinery. Around a purpose that inspires them. We're trying to bring people together, inspire them to share their gifts so they can grow in our organization, play as a team, and go home each night feeling valued. And then we have to create value. If we are not creating value that validates the faith that our investors put in us, we put our people at risk, okay? Just like Intel is going to be announcing thousands of layoffs. FedEx announced thousands of layoffs. Amazon is delayed thing. So again, you've got to create value in your business model, or you put the people in your span of care at risk. So people, purpose, and performance, all three. So how did this, again, I gave you the example of the Ferrari. I made that point. It's, you've got to have a good business model, or you can't be good to your people. And again, that is big thing I want you to walk away with. It's not just about being nice. Parenting is not about being nice, okay? It is about doing the right thing for the people you bring into this world so that they have a good future. So let me share with you how I went through this transformation. I believe they're revelations. I believe God gave me this message because it's the only way I can explain it. So in 1987, I bought a company in South Carolina. It was about a $50 million company. They made the machines. If you get a bag of Fritos, they made the machines that form the bag, weighed the chips, fill the bag, and seal the bag, called form, fill, and seal machine. $50 million company, it's about a 100-year-old company. I acquired it. I flew down there to be there the first day. I didn't know the people. So I walked in to get a cup of coffee in the lunchroom. And what happens in March in South Carolina? Everybody talks about March Madness, okay? So in the lunchroom, as I'm getting my coffee, everybody's talking about the outcome of the games that night, who's going to be in the Final Four, how much they're winning money in the office pool, and they're having fun. And the closer it got to 8 o'clock, you could just see the fun go out of their bodies. And I didn't know I was experiencing this. I had to put this together later. But I was clearly impacted by people having fun and then going to work, and you could see the joy go out of their body. So I walked into my first meeting that day. For this first day I owned the company, and I decided to meet with the customer service team because a $55 million company, $21 million of the business was spare parts. Very profitable, very important part of the business. And I wanted to meet with the people because I thought the first way we could touch the customers is do a good job in customer service. So having been influenced by March Madness, I sit down in this room with about 8 or 10 people who handle the parts business. And I said, we're going to play a game. That's what I mean. We're going to play a game. Whoever sells the most parts each week wins $100. And if the team makes the team goal, then each member of the team wins $100. I said, you can't do that. And, you know, I handle the fresh produce. They had 21 reasons why it wouldn't work. And I had 21 reasons why it would. And the good news about CEO, you do what you want to do. You know, I didn't really get into it. And again, I had never tried it, never thought about it. It popped out of me that day, having watched people play March Madness and have fun. So again, I go back about a couple of months later, and guess what happened? Revenue went up by 20% in the aftermarket, and joy went up 1,000%. Seriously. I sat down with this group and I said, what happened? I just wanted you to have fun. They said, Mr. Chapman, I always thought I was nice to the customer, but now I'm really nice to the customer because I want to win. I said, you're kidding me. And another gentleman, a young man, said, you know, when the phone rings and you're working on something for a customer, you kind of keep your head down, hoping somebody else is going to answer the phone because you don't really want to pick up that phone and have to go figure out what they want or complain about delivery or price. Now we're going down to the switchboard operator and saying, how do you decide who gets what calls? Another gentleman said, Mr. Chapman, when a customer asks for something and we need engineering input, we write it up, what the customer's question is, and we send it over to engineering. And when it comes back, we call the customer back. Now we walk it over to engineering and ask them a question because we want to get back quickly to the customer because we want to win. And so I said, well, do you go home and talk to your families about this? Oh yeah. So this one lady, whose name was Mary, she's probably 55, 60 years old. She said, yeah. I said, well, what does your family say? Well, first of all, you have to understand, I live with my elderly mother, and she's not well. So she's not up when I get up in the morning. So when I go home at lunch, I check on her, how she's doing. She said, I walked in last Thursday. I said, Mom, how you doing? She said, how you doing this week? Are you winning? Can you imagine? I mean, seriously, people they were having fun creating value. That was the beginning of my transformation when I said, why can't business be fun? Why do we call it work? Why do we live in a society where we have TGIF? Thank God it's Friday. Get the hell out of this place and go drown my sorrows with a beer. I imagine a world, and you'll see this by the time I'm done, where we have TGIM. Thank goodness it's Monday. Get away from the kids and spouse and be in a place where I feel valued. So that was the first transformation. And I'd never thought about this game. And it popped out of me that day. And today we do this all over the world. And the stories would astound you in terms of the value we've created. Second, Cynthia and I are Episcopalians, and my mentor was director of our church. And Ed gave amazing sermons. And one day at church, I looked at Cynthia and I said, oh my God, Cynthia, Ed has only got us for 1 hour a week. We have people for 40 hours a week. We are 40 times more powerful than the church to impact people's lives. And as I walked out of the church that day, I said to myself, God, business could be the most powerful force for good in the world if we simply knew how to care for people, because we have them in our care for 40 hours a week. So that was the second principle. The third, I was at a wedding in Aspen now about 18 years ago. A friend of mine's daughter was getting married to another friend's son. And as my friend walked his daughter down the aisle, and I'd walked my two daughters down the aisle, everybody's oohing and howing how precious she looked, typical wedding. And as my friend got up to the altar, he said, her mother and I give our daughter to be wed to this young man. And he then sat down and the ceremony continued. And again, you see, my mind goes to a different place. And having walked my two daughters down the aisle, I said to myself, that's not what that father wanted to say. That's what he was told to say. What that father wanted to say is, look at young man. Our mother and I brought this precious young lady into this world. We've given her all the love and care we could possibly give her so she can be who she's intended to be. And we expect you, young man, through this marriage, that you will continue to respect her dignity, and through your marriage, as she will with you, she continued to be who she's intended to be. Do you understand that, young man? That is what every father wants to say at every wedding. And then my mind went to the place where I said, oh my God, all 12,000 people that work for us around the world are somebody's precious child. They're not engineers, accountants. So that day, my lens went from seeing people as functions to seeing people as somebody's precious child whose life I could profoundly impact. And it changed everything. When you look at, I tell you, I was at a McKinsey office in Amsterdam. I was speaking like this to a university in Amsterdam at McKinsey's invitation. And one of the partners had to leave after my speech. So after my speech, we go over to the McKinsey office, which is focused on leadership. And we're grab a bite to eat. And about an hour later, this partner who had to leave comes into the room. His name is McKelly. So McKelly, what are you doing here? I thought you had to go visit a client in Manchester, England. He said, well, I left your talk, touched by your talk, but I got in a cab and the driver was a relatively young man. He said he made some bad decisions on how to get me to the airport, got us stuck in a traffic jam, and I was going to miss my flight. I just told the guy, take me back to the office. Very frustrated because it was a significant meeting I was missing. He said, as I was driving up to the office, I was thinking about your speech, that everybody's somebody's precious child. And he said, instead of seeing that taxi driver as a taxi driver, I saw him as somebody's son. And he said, I talked to him dramatically differently when I talked to him as somebody's son than I talked to him as a driver. And it profoundly affected him. He actually just yesterday was talking, this was like 3 years ago, yesterday talked to me, and he's actually sharing our message all over Europe and is actually sharing it with Unilever, one of the world's largest companies right now. So when you see the people you have the privilege of leading, when you see people that you experience in life, not as a receptionist, not as a store clerk or, you know, an auto mechanic, but you see him as somebody's precious child and you treat him with respect and dignity, we could heal so much of the brokenness in the world. And so we determined that our vision was going to be from these experiences, that we were going to measure success by the way we touch the lives of people. We not only touch the lives of our 12,000 team members, but we touch the lives of our customers, our suppliers, our bankers, our communities. And as we take initiatives, we need to think about how our initiatives impact other people's lives and be good stewards of every relationship we touch. So what have we learned about leadership that I want you all to walk away with? Leadership is not a job, it is a privilege. And it's the stewardship of the lives entrusted you. And it takes skills, as I said, and courage to care. We have found that everywhere in the world, in every part of society, people simply want to know that who they are and what they do matters. And you have the ability through your leadership to validate their worth as individuals, which will be the most meaningful thing you could ever do to anybody. Again, we created a university where we teach people to be leaders internally because we can't send our team members back to universities because we teach management. Okay, we don't teach leadership. So we created an internal university and we teach 3 things. Empathetic listening is the foundation of all human relationships, and we don't teach it, but we do. So we teach it internally in our university. I was very much against teaching when we first came up with how are we going to transform managers and leaders, and somebody said, we got to teach them how to listen. I said, what? We know how to listen, we're adults. Guess what? It is the biggest thing. So our team overrode me and they developed a 3-day class called Empathetic Listening. And I was traveling to Minneapolis about 6 months later, and a young lady in her 30s, I think, walked up to me. She was our human resource director, our people person in Minneapolis. She walked up to me and said, Mr. Chapman, I just took your listening class at your university. And I said, really? What was it like? I had no idea. She said, it changed my life. I said, wait, we taught a 3-day class at work and it changed your life? She said, yes, I now know how to raise my 2-year-old daughter. So my wife and I started traveling around the country, listening to people who took our classes. And virtually everybody talked about the impact it made on their life, not the way they ran the accounting department, the production department, but it transformed people's lives when you teach them how to care. So the 3 things we teach are empathetic listening, which is the foundation of caring, recognition and celebration. How do you let people know they matter? Not just that a boy, congratulations, 5 years with the company, but in thoughtful, timely ways, letting people know they matter. And remember, this came from Cindy and I raising 6 kids. If you don't spend more time letting your kids know what they do right than what they could do better, it's very difficult for them to hear it. It's basically 5 times more you should compliment your kids or others. And we find adults are identical. So it's called shining a light in the organization, looking for the goodness and holding up and saying thank you in thoughtful, timely, appropriate ways with skills. So we teach people how to let people know they matter. And finally, culture of service, seizing the opportunity to serve others, moving from kind of a me-centric world to a we-centric world. And leaders give those in their span of care a grounded sense of hope for the future, a grounded sense of hope for the future, which is your business model. So again, what we've learned, we can create economic and human value and harmony. We try to model that, okay, with our growth. And in this last, 2 years of the great resignation where people are quitting jobs and talent's hard to find, we are not experiencing that at all. We are seeing unbelievable talented people leaving major companies wanting to be a part of our culture. Doesn't that make sense? You know, don't you want to be a part of an organization that sees you as a person, not a function, and send you home feeling valued? But when we had before Biden was elected and various people were running for office, Bernie Sanders was talking a lot about socialism. And you young people apparently were showing a lot of interest in socialism over the free market enterprise. So the CEO Roundtable, America's largest corporate leaders, came out with a statement that said, we need to think about more than just the shareholders. A, it's sad they had to say that. And B, they have no idea how to do it. Okay. They're never taught to care. My first major board member was on the Chrysler Daimler board. He was chairman of the largest glass company in the world. August Bush introduced me to him. He's considered one of the best businessmen in America. I said, Bob, in all your public board experience, how often do you as a board ever talk about culture, the people in your organization? He thought a minute and he said, well, once at Chrysler, we talked about executive compensation. That's as close as he could come to ever. Our boards don't know how to talk about culture because it's a foreign language. We talk about compliance and governance and share value and analysts. We don't talk about caring. So again, CEOs hired by the boards represent the shareholders. So the brokenness we're feeling starts in the boardroom. It starts with the investors, okay? But it takes skills. You can't ask people to care. You have to teach them how to care. That's what we should be doing here. The most fundamental skill you should learn in this university is how to care for others. How we lead, as I said, has a profound impact on how people live. The brokenness we're seeing, you guys could cure tomorrow by simply leaving this institution and becoming tomorrow's leaders. As I said to you, Cynthia and I were raising, I learned more raising 6 kids than I ever did in business school about leadership. There's absolutely no difference. What is parenting? The stewardship of the precious lives that come into your family through birth, adoption, or second marriage that you all take very seriously. What is leadership? The stewardship of those precious lives that walk into our buildings or plant who simply want to know they matter. And you have the ability to do that and dramatically shape their lives. And again, you can't ask people to care. You have to teach them how to care. So our culture has become so known since Simon Sinek first discovered it and people started coming in from all over the world that Harvard referred us to Fordham University, a Jesuit university, where the Pope has challenged the 200 Jesuit universities in the world to create a more human management, humanistic management. Now, unfortunately, I got to talk to the Pope because he screwed up. He called it management, okay? He didn't call it leadership, but you know, he's still a work in progress. So Fordham got a hold of us, and now we are partnering with some of your professors to try to transform professors to create human skills. And we're getting tremendous interest to create a world that works for 100% of humanity, driven really by the Pope. In addition, I think it was 3 weeks ago, I had the chance to speak at the United Nations on this because the United Nations is addressing this issue through Transforming Education Summit. So I was on a panel and I had a chance to share this profound, meaningful to me that I had this stage to talk to the world about the need to create leadership in the world. And the reaction was phenomenal to the message. And so I would say to you, another thing I learned along this journey, there's a high school football coach in Kimberly, Wisconsin named Steve Jones. He read my book and wanted to meet me. So he contacted our people in Green Bay and said, is there any way I could meet Mr. Chapman? So on one of my visits, I met with Steve Jones and I said, Steve, the only issue I have with sports is we have winners and we have losers. How do you coach young men, in this case, football, about winning and losing? He said, I don't. I teach them to play your position well for your fellow team members. And they won 72 games in a row, 5 out of 6 state championships. And now Steve is a speaker around the country, just wrote a book because it never occurred to me before I met Steve Jones. I always thought it was me and my career. I wanted to do well in my career. I wanted to advance. I never thought about Bill and Barry on each side of me. What Steve awakened me to is if you join an organization and you play your position well, you're creating a better future for the people on either side of you. It takes it from kind of a me-centric, it's all about me, to a we-centric. So we learned a great deal from Steve in our journey. Raj Sisodio wrote the book on Whole Foods, Conscious Capitalism, started a global movement of businesses being more conscious of the impact they make on society. Raj, it was my co-author, and after he thought in studying Whole Foods, it was about healthy foods, good purposes, like Whole Foods is centered on. So he wrote the book on conscious capitalism. But when he saw our culture, he said, I've now realized, how could somebody who works for the Metropolitan Sewer District have a great leader? He realized it has nothing to do with the product. And he wrote another book after I wrote a book called The Healing Organization, how businesses could be a source of healing in the world, regardless of the product you make, that the people are our purpose. Simon Sinek, who's the one who kind of eclectically found us, talks about us all over the world. Simon studies through the military how we teach officers eat last in the military. And he came up with the following statement. In the military, we honor those who give of themselves in service of others. And in business, we give bonuses to people who sacrifice others in service of themselves. Okay? That is so unbelievably true. So if Simon was here, he'd say, if we can teach our military leaders that their primary responsibility is the men and women in their care, why can't we teach business leaders the same thing we teach military leaders? Your primary responsibility is the men and women in their care. Not just being nice, but making sure you provide an environment for where they can be who they're intended to be and go home at night feeling valued. And the answer is we can, we are doing this, and it makes a profound impact on people's lives. So Simon Sinek, who first came in to see our company because he didn't believe what he heard, and we didn't know what we had, he spent 2 days talking to our people, and he stood up, we have it on recording, because we weren't paying him anything. He just said, I don't believe what I hear. So he came in, talked to our people, and he said, I'm no longer a nutty idealist. I've just seen what I dream of. He said, I dream of a world where you could walk on any street corner, tap anybody in the shoulder and say, do you like your job? And you say, no, I don't like my job. I love my job. So he said, if it exists, it must be possible. So Simon said, I'm no longer a nutty idealist. He then brought in Bill Urey of Harvard, who negotiates world peace, because he said, Bill, you got to see this place, you got to see it. So a world peace negotiator, Bill Urey, you can look him up, he's been negotiating world peace for 30 years. He did the same thing, came in for 2 days, and he looked at me and he said, I just saw the answer to world peace. And I said, Bill, how can you go to a manufacturing company and see the answer to world peace? He said, I saw a place where people genuinely care for each other. He said, I now realize that I've been going to global peace talks for 30 years around the world, and I now realize that's exactly what they are. They're global peace talks. The reason we have conflict in the world is because we don't know how to listen. I'm right and you're wrong. That's what we see in Congress. That's what we see in the United Nations. We don't know how to listen. We teach people to debate, but we don't teach people to listen. So we have the conflict between Biden and Putin and all the leaders of the world. We have this conflict at the governmental level. But when I meet some of our biggest followers, our culture are in Russia and China. They love what we're doing. You know, our book was recently bought by a Russian publisher to be published. So it is a universal issue that we have, that we genuinely don't know how to care for people. And we see the brokenness, and we try to blame it on iPhones and drugs and social media, and it's simply right here in this room. You could all cure this if you leave this institution with these skills. So we can teach people to care. So our book, Everybody Matters, as I mentioned, I think a typical business book sells 5,000 to 10,000. It's sold over 80,000 copies in 7 different languages in the world. And it continues to sell well all over the world. The manifesto of the book is, everybody wants to do better, trust them. Believe in the goodness of people, and they will respond accordingly. Leaders are everywhere in your company, not just in the senior offices. Leaders are everywhere. Find them and recognize them. People achieve good things, big and small, every day. Celebrate them. That is the skill we teach. We try to drown out the brokenness of the world by focusing on the goodness of the world, so we can so people can spend 8 hours a day with us enjoying the goodness of the world. Some people wish things were different. Listen to them. Don't debate it with them. Simply appreciate that they have a different view. Everybody matters. Show them. So Bill Urey, one of his expressions was, we have courageous patience in our company. We don't try to change anybody. We try to share our beliefs and welcome people to join us when they're ready. It's called courageous patience, because we don't know what people have been through in their personal life, their professional life. All we can do is say, when you're ready. So he describes it like a bus going around a circle. The bus, the truly human leadership bus, comes up, opens the door and says, would you like to join us and embrace the principles of truly human leadership? And they say, I'm just not ready yet. And we say, that's okay, because we'll be back. That bus comes around and opens the door again. And again, we say, are you ready to join us? And there's a guy named Randall Fleming in our company who was in the military, tough son of a gun. And he was one of the biggest negatives to this culture. Today, he's a professor. And Harvard wanted to write a book on the guy when they met him, because what a tremendous transformation. So there is goodness in everybody. It's just at different levels. And we need to give people the courageous patience to find a way to believe in what we're trying to do. So again, that's the message of the book. So we were told by a guy named Srikumar Rao, who is a contributing editor to Forbes magazine, that we needed to share this with the world, this blessing we've been given through these revelations. So we created a leadership institute around philanthropic capitalism, charge people who can afford to pay and give it away when they can't. It was 7 years ago. We had no idea how the market would react. And we now have 60 people dedicated full time to try to find people who believe what we believe and want to join us in this journey to heal the brokenness in the world. And it's amazing. I think, last count, we had over 50 clients. American Airlines was a major client, and Boys and Girls Club of America, Gallo, Coke. I mean, it's astounding how this message resonates with people around the world who want to embrace this. So all we're trying to do is to share our message and feed the hungry. Look for people who believe what we believe and want to join us in this journey. So I think at Barry-Wehmiller now stands for building a better world, okay? Our product is our people who believe that God blessed us with a message that could heal the brokenness you're all feeling, reading about, if we simply, in every part of our society, this is not just business. We find it in education, government, healthcare, nonprofit, and all parts of the world. We simply are not creating leaders with the skills and courage to care. And care does not mean being nice any more than parenting means being nice. It's doing the right thing for the people you have the privilege of leading so they can live life fully in service of others. So our hope today is to get past the academic by telling simple stories. Raj Sisodia, my co-author, is a professor. He was a professor at Babson when I first met him. He's brilliant. He gives talks all over the world on the Industrial Revolution. So we were both asked to speak at an entrepreneurial conference in Texas a few years ago. Raj gave up and gives a phenomenal presentation how the Industrial Revolution profoundly benefited society, creating wealth, health, communities, education, healthcare. Gives it and got a nice round of applause at the end of his 45-minute presentation. I stood up. Nobody had ever heard of Barry-Wehmiller, never heard of Bob Chapman, never heard about trillion ownership, and I shared my stories. And people stood up with a standing ovation and would not sit down, because I reflected. I said, what did I just learn? Raj talks to our head with academic ideas. And my stories talk to people's heart. And so I would say to you that we've been blessed with some stories that could profoundly connect people to join us in this movement to start healing the brokenness we're feeling. And you are our hope. You are the future leaders And if this university makes sure that by the time they hand you that diploma, you are ready to go out and be a true leader, where you have the skills and courage to care, we could see a dramatically different world for you and your families and your friends. So thanks.
Field a few questions?
Only if they're really good.
Oh, no pressure. We'll start with those in the audience. We'll see if you have questions. We're doing the webinar. Type them into the Q&A, and we'll do it that way.
Yes, ma'am.
So my experience isn't necessarily in the business world, but local politics. And local politics can get a little bit dicey. You talked a little bit about global peace and how having peace talks isn't necessarily the way to get to a solution. But when we get to those relationships where we're listening to fight back, or we're listening
No,
to,
it's listening to fight back.
yeah,
Not listening to validate, you're listening to fight back.
and I'm hoping that you can talk a little bit about that so I can help reframe that in my mind, because what you said today.
All I can tell you is that when you listen to validate, listen to understand, is a profoundly different conversation. There was a video called Bridging the Gap, and they took a very religious school students and a liberal, so a non-religious side, and they taught them how to listen. And they got together and they were hugging each other after they got, and so they weren't, they saw the beauty in people, okay, as opposed to this. So unless you learn to listen, how can you work with them? If you're trying to convince somebody else. So when I look at the mayors and the aldermen and the city councils, I just see the brokenness of it. Again, if you don't know how to listen, how do we work together? If you see the world through different lenses, and how do we ever bridge this gap of coming together and understanding the way we do it? Instead of me telling you how I feel about abortion, you do. Tell me how you feel about the issue of abortion. I don't sit here and say, I can hardly wait for the debate. I just simply validate that you have the right beliefs you have, and then let's find a way to work together. So all I can say to you is listening with you. So Cynthia and I realized this when Cynthia was on my research with me, people said how it feels in marriage, they listen to the kids, they didn't do divorce now. So we created a nonprofit. So we have about 13,000 people around the country now in communities that listen to that. And you know, we talk about policing in America. I live in Aspen, Colorado. The Aspen Police Department sent some of the policemen to our class on listening, 3-day class. I was sitting at dinner at graduation, and two policemen sitting on either side of me. I said, "What did this class mean to you?" I said, "Mr. Chapman, we take hundreds of hours to learn how to enforce the law. But we never taught how to do it. This class is the most important class I've ever taken to be a good steward in my role in our community." So we wonder what's wrong with police. We didn't teach police to care about you. We taught them to enforce the law. We didn't teach politicians to listen and talk and talk. Right. I was asked to speak to at a Republican congressional gathering of 200 congressmen and 50 lobbyists in Washington, D.C. I was sitting at the table with Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, getting ready to give my keynote. And the lady that organized this political gathering of Republican congressmen and lobbyists, she leaned over to me right before I was going to go talk. She said, "Mr. Chapman, what are we going to do about the lack of trust?" I said, "You mean in Washington?" She said, "I mean in this room. Nobody trusts anybody." This is right before I'm going to give my talk. So when I got up to give my talk, I got through my notes and I said, "You know, the problem you all have, you all got issues you don't have. Problems you don't have. How do we work together if we don't know how to listen to it?" So in our communities, in our government, I like the way Putin and I talk to each other. It's disgusting. Even our presidents, you know, all the political people, we're right and they're wrong. They're the problem. We don't know how to listen. That is the biggest issue we face in our society. In marriages, child, you know, you can't believe the feedback we get. So, you know, we've already taught 13,000 people. We're now dealing with major police forces. We just had the the head of Michigan state troopers with 3,000 state troopers say he's going to take all of his 3,000 state troopers through this class. So they begin to bring care into policing. So we wonder what's wrong with people? Nothing's wrong with people. They were just never taught to care. So local politics is no different than national politics. We can't change the politicians until we change education. Make sense?
Bob, the folks remote are desperately interested and empathetically listening to you.
Okay.
So they need you to stay a little.
Oh,
bit
right here.
closer to the
Okay.
microphone.
I was compelled to.
I know. No, that was beautiful. But we're getting all these. Oh,
So
I want to hear you.
I'm going to ask you all a question. This is kind of a new subject for you, right? You probably haven't heard too much of this before. Take a minute before you raise your hand. How many of you believe that this message is what we need in this world from what you've heard? Raise your hand if you honestly believe that this makes sense to the issues you feel we face at home, at work, in our communities. How many of you does this resonate with you? Just raise your hand. Even the dean gets it, guys. I mean, seriously, I can't believe McKinsey people, the Harvard, nobody debates what I just said with you. They just don't know how to do it. And you're in an educational institution. You all need to learn to care. It will serve every part of your life, from your marriage to your raising kids to your relationship with your community. It is the most fundamental skill. If you heard the stories that I could share with you, you would all be sobbing the healing power of caring. And it starts with learning to listen, not to debate or judge, but to validate the work. People have the right, and we just need to understand each other. We can't solve our problems in our communities, in our companies, in our families, until we learn to listen to each other. Not to debate, not to judge, but to listen. Yes.
Thank you so much for your beautiful talk. I think you're speaking, with all respect to Harvard, to the university that pushes out this message and has a few generations of leaders that are living true to this. And it's an uphill battle in some communities or organizations. My question to you is, you have a lot of companies that are like, yes, I want in, but then they try to implement this, or they hear what you're really trying to accomplish. Have you found any that get too scared to actually do it because the culture shift, the strategy, the heart of actually caring about people is just difficult for them to swallow and execute on?
Well, I use the analogy, if tomorrow we were to decide, you know what, China is a major force in the world, we all need to learn to speak Chinese. You say, okay, but we'd have to teach people how to do that, right? You can't speak the language of caring without teaching it. You can't ask people to care. So when we I've never had, again, I had the top people at Unilever on the call the last couple of days. They love the message, never heard it before, but love it. Okay, the CEOs of hospitals I talked to love the message, they just don't know how to do it. So the issue is, our boards don't embrace it. Our boards represent the shareholders who represent the investors, and if they don't deliver numbers, they hurt people. So we've got a very broken system. So it starts with education, okay? I was with a dean of a major university at dinner the other night, and who has a massive endowment, one of the biggest in the country. And I said to the dean, where do you invest your endowment? He said, in private equity firms. Why? Well, look at the returns. Yeah, but they're destroying our country. There's no human part. They're not bad people. It's just a system where you buy it for $1 and you strip some costs out and you flip it for $4 and you give an 18% return to the university. So we've got a very broken system. It's all on economic return. There's no human dignity. So our boards don't know how to do it because they were never taught. Even my board today, I will tell you, when we talk about caring, they're wonderful people, but it's a foreign language to them. It's not what you do in boardrooms. You talk about strategy and you talk about compliance. So we need to change the fundamentals. The business needs to embrace caring, and so we can't change everybody. We have to find people who believe what we believe. again, Doug Parker, chairman of American Airlines, a wonderful human being, heard me talk at a church in Dallas. And he asked me to come and speak to his global leadership team. He's chairman and CEO of American Airlines. And at the end of the conversation, he said, I thought my job was to build the world's biggest airline, which I did. I never thought about the 130,000 people that are in my span of care. This has given me a whole new purpose, he said. But he said, how do you think I should handle my board? And I said, very carefully, because they're not going to understand at all. Eventually, the American Airlines board, Doug's a phenomenal human being in a broken system. Eventually, they decided it was a strategic advantage to have a good culture. That's called boardroom bullshit, okay? Buzzwords, okay? So until we change education and start creating leaders, all we hope to do is be a model that you can do this, okay? Our board loves it, but they don't know how to contribute to it because it's a foreign language to our board members. So again, it all begins right here until we create people. And again, we hope to continue to model it and find others that join us. And again, nobody ever debates what I just said to you. I had a gentleman at a major company speaking to leaders from a $20 billion division of a large organization. At the end of my talk, one of the executives said, what if our corporate team doesn't endorse this? Kind of your statement. I thought a minute and I said, what do they need to endorse? Do you need a memo from corporate that says on Monday we're going to start caring? You know, do you need requests? Do you need fund requests? No. The journey is unique to each other. It begins with you deciding that you are going to embrace this yourself and model it. And eventually people should come to you. So I said, you don't need any authority to care. You just need the skills to care. And it begins with empathetic listening and seeing the beauty in people, not the differences. You know, I'll give you another, I just want to kind of, you've all heard a lot about inclusion and diversity, right? Big thing going on. So I was invited by CEO Magazine to be on a call with other business executives. I agreed to be on it, but I didn't really remember what it was about. So I get on a Zoom call and up pops Brian Monahan, head of Bank of America with 200,000 people. Then the head of Ernst & Young with 300,000 people. I said, ooh, geez, how do I get on this call? These are big boys. And so I didn't have any idea what the call was about. And all of a sudden they introduced Johnny Taylor, who's head of the Society for Human Resource Management in Washington, D.C., the largest human resource organization in the world with 300,000 members. And the subject is inclusion and diversity. So I thought, ooh, I better be quiet because I haven't given it 1 ounce of thought. So Brian Monahan comes on doing all the classic things on inclusion and diversity, you know, starting to teach how to see the world through other people's eyes and all the classic response to a social issue we have. Does a beautiful job. The head of Ernst & Young, different words, same point. There's this, all the boardrooms kind of move in the same direction. They don't want to get sued. They want to avoid lawsuits. So I'm saying nothing. So about 4 people talk. And all of a sudden, Dan, the editor of CEO Magazine, said, Bob, we'd love to hear your thought. And I said, oh, here it goes. I'm going to do it. And I said, in all respect to Brian, what he's doing back in America, I think it's perfectly fine for them to embrace this. It sounds like a very professional response to a social issue we have. And John, the head of Ernst & Young, I said, we're not doing any of that. I said, I believe that we are going much deeper. We're not teaching people to deal with our differences. We're teaching people to see the beauty in everybody through listening. And you could hear a pin drop on that call. Nobody had any idea how to react to me. And an interesting thing, at the end of the call, Johnny Taylor, this brilliant guy who runs SHRM, it's called, said, Bob, you and I ought to talk. I said, fine. So about a week later, I get on the call with Johnny Taylor. And he said, the first thing he says to me, Bob, I was meant to meet you. Never debated my position on inclusion and diversity, and actually brought the 8 top leaders from his organization to see our culture, as you did, and loved it. And he just nominated me and selected me as the CEO of the year for the SHRM organization with 300,000 members, a big event in Chicago last week. And here's Johnny Taylor, the model of inclusion and diversity. And I said, we're not doing any of that. for teaching people not to see our differences, but to see the beauty in everybody. And he loved it. So I'd say to you, we've been on this unique, eclectic path, driven, I believe, by intervention through God, of the way we were intended to live together, where we learn to care for each other, moving from a me-centric world to a we-centric world. So does that make sense? Another question. Come on, you guys are supposed to be, yes.
So we talk about structure, behavior, results. We're trying to create formula for making improvement. And try to design systems that allow people to behave in a certain way or yield results, behavioral economic models, things like that. Do you think it addresses at the more basic level? Like when we talk about common sense, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, there doesn't seem to be a lot of common sense about it anymore because of the social problems and issues that we bring up, almost people wanting to be offended by everything we encounter on a daily basis. Do you think there's a formula for addressing it, or is it just a more basic?
Well, you know, I'm an accountant. And how could I possibly have come up with this formula that people from around the world would say they've never seen anything like it? Okay, how is it possible? I didn't read a book. So I believe the formula we created was inspired, not intellectually. And again, and we share this story through, we share our message through stories, not academic theory, not psychological theory. And the reaction is phenomenal around the world, again. So my hope is that some of these stories I've shared with you kind of connect to your heart in terms of what you want to do with your life, okay? That you want to be a source for good in the world. Leave this Jesuit university inspired by your faith to go out and live life in service to others, okay? And you cannot imagine the joy when you see people who are impacted by this in terms of the healing for their marriage, their relationship with their kids. They wouldn't be divorced now. So, you know, the fact, I didn't, honestly, when I was invited to speak, I didn't know Gonzaga was a Jesuit university. I knew you had a basketball team. That's all I knew. And to think that you all are people, assume of good faith and want your life to have some meaning and purpose. You know, I always say to people your age, write your eulogy. Take some time and sit down and say, if 120 years from now you leave this earth and you ask me, because I'm gonna be 180 then, to read your eulogy, what do you want me to say about your life? Think about what would make you proud the time you had on this earth that you would want somebody to say about your life, and then go make it true. Okay? Live life with intention. I find so many people I experience in life live life from event to event. I got a college degree, then I got a job, then I got married, then we bought a second home, then we took a trip, then we had kids, grandkids. So many people see life as a series of events as opposed to a journey. I would hope, given your faith in this institution, that you see the time you have on this earth as precious, and that you want to use the gifts you were given to make society a more caring place for you and those around you, so we can heal this brokenness we're all feeling. But you are our hope. And certainly I would think Jesuit University is a fertile field for this to begin, right? Well, thank you for the time to share this with you. Everything